Hi everyone, my name is Sofia Korech and I'm with the State Department's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, and I want to welcome you to today's chat on the Americans with Disabilities Act 20th anniversary. I have the delight of having Ann Cody here with me, Special Advisor on International Disability Rights for the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Sophia. It's great to be here.
It's so great to have you here, especially on the day of the 28th anniversary.
Thank you.
I especially am looking forward to hearing from you about the history of the ADA and also how that fits into the work that we do here at the department and in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor to promote the human rights of persons with disabilities around the world.
I'm looking forward to it.
So let's jump right in.
Okay, great.
So to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about the history of the ADA right up until its passage in 1990 and also how it fits in with our broader civil rights movement here in the U.S.?
Sure. Well, in the 1970s, the disability rights community really came together to advocate for non-discrimination laws and access to education and public services and local government and federal government services and programs. And so those laws really laid the foundation for the Americans with Disabilities Act and really developed the advocacy credibility of the disability community. The activists really borrowed the strategy and tactics from the civil rights movement and in terms of employing their strategies on getting legislation, the 504 legislation from the Rehabilitation Act enacted, and that really laid, as I said, laid an opportunity for the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990.
Thank you. That's a great background, and of course we know the law is in the books and it's quite comprehensive, but the other piece is educating individuals, including persons with disabilities, about their rights. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that and what we do here and abroad to do that?
Sure. Well, as an anti-discrimination law, it's really important for people with disabilities to know their rights and to know, specifically what businesses and local governments and public entities can and can't do and what they need to do in order to accommodate people with disabilities, either through services, goods and services, or through facilities and access, to physical environments, so that they can advocate when there are barriers, especially when the ADA was being implemented in 1990. It was implemented actually in waves, particularly public transportation access. So people really had to be able to push for access, especially in their local communities, where it was important for them to educate, again, the public about their responsibility to become accessible and accommodate people with disabilities and their legal responsibilities to do that. So it was really the responsibility of all parties to make that happen.
Thank you. And what do we do to ensure full and equal access? You mentioned transportation, but if you want to talk about any other ways as well, both here and abroad, since a lot of our work here at the department focuses on ensuring the rights of persons with disabilities abroad.
Right. Well, full and equal access requires that the law have monitoring and enforcement mechanisms in it, and federal agencies here in the U.S. Make sure that that people have the ability to file complaints and suits and seek relief. And then internationally, the Americans with Disabilities Act really, as the landmark gold standard of disability rights legislation in the world, really laid the foundation for other countries to begin to develop disability rights laws and get them enacted. And it also led to and contributed to the development of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. A number of the characteristics of the ADA are reflected in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Thank you. And can you also talk about, you and I and all of our travels abroad to foreign countries, to the United Nations and other bodies are often educating others on the ADA and on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but can you talk a little bit about what we do department-wide as well on this and how DRL's work fits in?
Sure. Well, we lend expertise to other governments around the world who are looking to write laws or rewrite laws, and we work with civil society as well to assist them in terms of developing the capacity to advocate for stronger laws or getting laws enacted. So we help we help also connect our experts with their experts through maybe it's federal agency experts or NGO experts who can really provide technical support to developing the laws or implementing them or getting the standards just right in terms of accessibility.
Great, thank you. And of course, as well, in the multilateral context, we're often pushing for resolutions on that advance the rights of persons with disabilities, and that fits hand in hand with our work at embassies as well. And can you also talk, besides our formal work at the department, the ADA has really opened up opportunities for Americans abroad of all ages, youth with disabilities. Can you talk about the impact you've seen in your time of Americans going abroad and what opportunities they now have they might have not before?
Yeah, it's really exciting to see more and more, especially young people, students studying abroad, students with disabilities. So the opportunities that they've had here in this country to really develop the interests and also get the education and skills they need to seek opportunities abroad has really been exciting. Here at the State Department, we've really expanded those opportunities to ensure that we have very diverse exchange programs and a diverse group of Americans going abroad. And we also, I forgot to mention that as the State Department, we also work with our embassies and consulates overseas. We actually have a bureau that focuses on accessibility in the consulates in our facilities overseas. But getting back to exchanges, we work with our embassies overseas to make sure that those exchanges are successful and effective.
Great. Yeah. And to bring it to a little bit of a personal level with your experience as a Paralympian, I wanted to hear a little bit about how the ADA has influenced your career abroad, both as an athlete and now in this role as well.
Well, the ADA, so I retired from competitive sport in 1993, so shortly after the ADA came into effect, but the ADA really helped me in my career, my professional career. As I was launching my professional career after retiring from sport, having access to, private companies and public entities and being able to use public transportation and all of those facilities and all the facilities and access were really critical to me in terms of being successful and effective, particularly working in the private sector for the amount of years that I did. So I really can't imagine that I would have been as effective or successful in my career without the ADA.
Great, that's really important, and I think the personal experiences especially show the impact of the ADA.
Absolutely.
Now also, what are some challenges that you still think that Americans both here and abroad are facing in either implementing the ADA or knowing about their rights, or just challenges particularly in traveling abroad that you have still seen in this role or during your time as an athlete?
Right. Accessibility around the world is not universal. Many countries, emerging countries, are still dealing with challenges of accessibility and enacting disability rights laws that have enforcement mechanisms to ensure that accessibility is happening. It's a real challenge, and we're hearing from disability advocates and disabled people's organizations that there's a real gap in terms of accessibility in their country compared to our country. There's just a huge difference in the way they're able to access their experience here in the U.S. So traveling abroad is really challenging with a disability, especially if you're going to a country that's an emerging country as far as its economy and stuff. So you really have to be willing to put yourself in those situations where it's not going to be accessible everywhere, and you're going to rely on other people to assist you. And other countries like ours, the more developed countries, we're still having a lot of challenges with education, with employment. The employment rate for people with disabilities is still really abysmal here in the U.S. and across the world. So that's another area where we're still working and trying to find best practices, and we're sharing best practices with other countries and colleagues in other countries around the world too, to make sure that when we find something that works, we're spreading it so that we can kind of crack that nut and create more opportunities in the workplace for people with disabilities.
Thank you. I mean, as important as highlighting the successes, we recognize there's still challenges that remain, so it's important to have that dialogue as well. So thank you for highlighting some of those examples.
Sure.
Now we talked about the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that over 160 countries have ratified, and many are now looking at national level legislation or implementing other international laws. And what advice would you give to young activists with disabilities in a country where maybe they've just ratified the convention, or there's really an opportunity to develop a type of law like the ADA? What should they do? We talk about disability rights being a bridge issue often in difficult environments. So if you were talking to them right now, what advice would you give them so that they could take on not just the ADA, the provisions, but the legacy as well?
I would say the most important thing as advocates is to work together with all different types of disabilities. So everybody's working together. The parents of children with disabilities, people with who are blind, deaf, use wheelchairs, have amputations, all need to be working together. People with intellectual disabilities and psychiatric or mental disabilities all need to be working together and approaching the government together and the parliaments or whatever, and looking for champions within their parliaments or congresses to really help them craft legislation that will have those enforcement mechanisms that are so important to being effective. And also recognizing that as you build those coalitions of disability advocates, know that those are the coalitions that are going to also be going out into the communities and educating the rest of the population about the new law and what it does and what it says and why it's important and why it matters and why people need to comply with it. So I think those are some of the primary things I would recommend.
Thank you. Those are all really helpful recommendations. You mentioned going out, not just implementing, but educating others. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of coalition building and working across marginalized groups, especially in a society where laws are now being developed, and if you have any examples from that of what particularly works well or any advice, that would be great.
Okay. Well, I think it's something that the disability community realized right away as they were working on the ADA, that the cross-coalition work was going to be really important in terms of reaching members of Congress, reaching the business community, people who were concerned about having a legislation, forcing them to create accessibility in their businesses that was going to cost them money. So we really needed to partner with the civil rights community, so people of color, the LGBTI community, the women's movement, and many others, to ensure that they understood that we were part of their broader coalition, even though we had not been, really actively or visibly seen as a part of it. And that has really served us well in the intervening 28 years when we've had issues on Capitol Hill where we really needed that broader coalition going beyond disability rights. So those were also important partnerships to forge early on, and that's always helpful to begin developing those as young activists starting out. It can be challenging because you're also educating those populations about why disability should be why people with disabilities should be part of that coalition. And one of the reasons is people with disabilities belong to all the stratosphere of life, every socioeconomic background, race, religion, geographic location, and everything. So everybody has people with disabilities in their subgroup.
Thank you. That's really important, and especially as we do our broader human rights work and DRL, the importance of coalition building and looking at cross-cutting issues is really important in the inclusion of persons with disabilities. So thank you for that. I know our time is coming to an end, so I wanted to, we're celebrating the 28th anniversary today, but looking ahead to a year from now on the 29th, is there anything you would like to see in terms of a new development or a focus on a particular area of the ADA, or anything you'd want
Yeah.
to see between now and next year?
You know, I think what I'm seeing is being a veteran and, you know, who's been in it for the long duration is really a rejuvenation of looking at the ADA and where there needs to be some more emphasis, because I see some of the focus on accessibility and accommodation kind of falling away a little bit. People think they've already accomplished what they needed to accomplish, and so some things are starting to, I'm thinking of, hotel stays and so public accommodation and things like that, where, you know, we see trends that are changing in terms of the types of furniture and fixtures that we see in facilities, and they're not as accessible to people with disabilities, and it's not discovered until they've already done the whole renovation, and carpets with really thick padding under it. Those are the types of things that continue to evolve, I think, in our businesses and that affect us directly. Also, we should be thinking about and looking toward the 30th anniversary of the ADA. Those every 10-year anniversaries are really big ones. So I think next year and going into next year, we should be thinking about that too, and how we want to celebrate the 30th anniversary, the third decade of the ADA.
Thank you so much. Those are all great ideas for us to think about over the next year and looking ahead to the 30th anniversary as well. So thank you, Ann, Cody, so much for being here today, and it was a pleasure to have the opportunity to discuss the Americans with Disabilities Act with you on its 28th anniversary.
Likewise. Let's toast to the 28th.
Yes. Happy
Here's
birthday,
to the 28th
ADA.
anniversary.
Yes.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you so much. And if you'd like to learn more about our democracy and human rights programming, you can tune into our Facebook and Twitter accounts at State DRL. Thanks so much for joining us today.